Hey everyone, welcome back to Leandra the TBR0. I was tagged by Booktube with Amy to do the book acquiring tag. I am so excited because I think many of my answers will be different to hers, and I'm honored that she was interested to see some controversy going on. I haven't actually thought of my own answers to these questions, but to give you some info, this is a tag that involves something like 11 to 12 questions, and they're all surrounding the topic of acquiring, keeping, buying books. Everything to do with how one acquires a book to read it. I haven't done any prep. I have watched Amy's own video, and honestly, I think everyone should go watch that one, especially if you're already watching mine, because her answers are definitely going to influence mine. Some of her own ideologies 100% made sense, and I intend to adopt them. I have written some of them down so that I can hopefully give her credit where credit is due when I bring up that same idea. But without further ado, let's just get into it and let me answer these questions off the cuff. I would say I'm similar to Amy with this question because I used to be a spontaneous buyer, and it was actually quite bad. I think my problem is that where I grew up, when I obviously was living at home, I didn't live anywhere where there was an immediate bookstore, so it was a really big trip to go drive to a bookstore. So when I would go to, say, Barnes & Noble, again, because we didn't really have many small bookstores around where I lived, it was this huge event where I had to buy, say, honestly 5 to 10 books to feel satisfied because it had been so long since I last came there. And I would definitely be influenced by book covers, by the graphics, by the title, by what was on certain displays that obviously are meant to be eye-catching. So I had no strategy, no understanding of which authors would appeal to me and which wouldn't. So it was just a free-for-all smorgasbord. But now, as I am getting older, I'm definitely an adult now. I've graduated college, I've lived out in the world for a bit, and I've returned to college for my master's degree. I, especially in the last couple of years, after COVID originally hit, have become a lot more conscientious. Or conscious. I think conscious is actually the right word. I've become a much more conscious, sensible buyer. I try to think about what the book would give me in regards to, is it the genre that I'm attracted to? Is it the title? Is it this author? Have I seen a lot of buzz about them? And also, because my channel is Leandra the TBR0 and my goal is to slowly decrease the number of books on my TBR shelves, I am also trying to see if I can get the book anywhere else for free. So that may include a NetGalley arc if the book hasn't been published yet. It could be a library book in its physical form. Or since I have joined the library staff in my area, I've learned that there are Libby and Hoopla as 2 library apps that you can have on your phone or even on your computer, and you have access to ebooks and audiobooks that way. And it's the same as any physical library book. You would borrow it for, say, 14 to 21 days depending on the policy, and then it just gets returned automatically from your device. And I've found that to be really awesome and a great source to just be sure if it's something I would be interested in. And I have had it multiple times where I've read the book from NetGalley or read it through, say, Libby or some other library source, loved it so much that I've then gone out and physically bought it so I can continue to support that author. So that is pretty much, at least at the moment, how my strategy is when it comes to acquiring books. I guess I already just answered question 2 in question 1, but I do have some books that I buy automatically, and those are books in a certain genre that is comforting to me, that I know I enjoy, that I have no problem taking a chance on because the chances are so high that I'll like it. For instance, I'm a subscriber to the Mysterious Bookshop and I specifically subscribe to their Auto Penciler Presents American Mystery Classics. You can see that I'm a huge fan of them. You can just grab one off the shelf, and they're all designed in this way, and I think it's an amazing publication to support because it isn't a large publisher. It's Penciler Publishing, and I'm supporting a privately owned bookshop in the process, going through their subscription service. And many of these titles haven't been in publication for decades. Some of them haven't been in print since their first publication in, say, like the 1930s. So I am definitely on board to supporting them. I don't feel badly about automatically buying them, getting the book every month through subscription. So that's one actually unique example where I'm totally for acquiring more books. Beyond that, as I said before, I like to go through the library first, and I'm pretty lucky because I live in Pennsylvania, so I have my own library system here, and my parents still live in New York, so I can always kind of go through their library cards and see if I'm visiting them. For instance, I'm actually driving up to Rochester tomorrow, and I already have a book on hold at their local library that I intend to read because my current library system doesn't have it on stock, or in stock, I guess you'd say. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that other family members have other library systems at their disposal to see if I like it. And if I end up loving it, I will buy it for sure, 100%. However, it's important to know that just by borrowing it from the library, you are supporting that author and supporting their work while supporting the local library, because having been now behind the scenes working at a library, I've seen books where the librarian and other library assistants are going through the stacks and checking circulation. So if a book hasn't circulated in a long time, the library doesn't see the point in keeping it on the shelves. So then they'll take it out of circulation, either recycle it, give it away, put it in a book sale, whatever the case is. And now that book isn't as accessible to a wider audience since it's not at the library anymore. So sometimes I like to be able to give it a test run, take it out of the library, because then I'm also helping support and keep that book on the shelves a little bit longer. And then if I love it, I buy it. My philosophy is thus. I think that if you can shop in person, then 100% do it, because you can even go to that physical bookstore, ask them to order it online for you and have it shipped directly to that store, and then you're still supporting them in that way. I totally understand though that certain areas, not only of the US, but across the globe, just don't have the same access to bookstores and libraries as I was that same way as a child. So I totally can support the idea of buying online if you have to. So I'm not against it. I just think that if you can buy in person, that is just a wonderful experience too. With that said, if you have to buy online, I personally like to go through bookshop.org because you can have a certain small bookstore, an independently owned bookstore, be the receiver of the funds that are donated. So you're supporting them by buying books from that are associated with their stock, but then also they're getting the donation that you have through bookshop.org. I am not a fan of Amazon. I think that you can buy Amazon items to an extent, depending on what they are, but when it comes to books, it is detrimentally hurting the book selling business. If bookstores continue to close, especially the big ones like Barnes & Noble or Books A Million in the area I'm living in right now, if those close, then that is going to actually harm the small bookstore businesses that exist, because really the big reason why publishing industries find it useful to continue publishing books, find it lucrative, is because these huge bookstores that get so much traffic, they're going to obviously be wanting a lot of books in stock of all of their, across the entire country or across the world, depending on what bookstore it is. And so I read an article saying that if those bookstores close, the big conglomerates, then we're really going to be in trouble when it comes to physical books and whether publishers decide if it's even worth it to publish physical books. So fun fact, not so fun, a bit doom and gloom, but things to keep in mind. So basically, I like to try to spread out my purchases. If I can, I buy at small bookstores, especially secondhand bookshops. Those are my favorite places because, as Amy has said, they are wonderful for helping you lessen your carbon footprint. you're also giving these books a new home and a second chance. I hate the idea of books only ever being used once and then being tossed aside. It's just, that's not the purpose of them. They're supposed to be shared or reread or appreciated, and that just, it really sucks if a book only has one cycle of life before it ends up being thrown out or recycled. Oh my gosh, there's so many parts to this question. So I prefer physical. I've always preferred physical, but I've also never really given audiobooks or digital a chance until January 2022. So these are new horizons for me. It's a new age, and I'm having a lot of fun with audiobooks especially. And what I've been doing, because I'm trying to get books off of my TBR shelves, if there's a book that I have really been neglecting, I'll look to see if the audiobook is available on Hoopla or Libby or even on YouTube, which a lot of free audiobooks are. Then I actually will be able to prioritize it a little bit more if I haven't had an audiobook already synced up, while I'm driving to work or doing whatever. I also like to go on walks in the mornings, like 2 to 3 miles. And so that is like, a half an hour to an hour's worth of listening. So I've definitely just, I'm a new Leandra when it comes to audiobooks, or thanks to audiobooks. And I love new books, especially if you're supporting like an indie author. If it's a book, it's so hard because I feel like I'm contradicting myself now, especially since I've been loving this subscription of classic American books, but a lot of these books have been out of print for decades and decades, so it's really hard to find used copies of them if you can. Not all of them, but a good amount of them, and I really like to support the cause, but used books that are, especially if it's like 2000 or earlier, and that's even me being dramatic, like in the past 5 years if it's been published, then, say like in 2015 and earlier, how many copies have already been printed and exist in the world? I'm sure not every person has that book and wants to keep it on their shelves. You know what I mean? So especially classics that are super old, I get so angry when I see people, I'm not angry at the people, but I'm angry for them because they're buying this brand new book for say like $15-$20. And if it's like The Odyssey, that book, come on, you should be able to find a used book for that for like 50 cents to $1. So depending on who the author is and how widely read they are, then you really should be able to find a used book. And I just think it's a waste of money unless you love them so much that you want a really nice copy. I totally understand that. I'm that same way when it comes to certain detective fiction authors, so I don't judge at all. I do have a certain collection of really nice editions that I personally have no regrets buying, so I totally get it. But like, especially for like, classes or something, all of those books, you should be able to find many old editions for super cheap. And that's where I get annoyed when I see like at Barnes & Noble, they're trying to sell this classic for like $30. Like, what? Who are you trying to kid? I spent too much time on this. Let's go to the next question. So I don't have any little free libraries in my area, but back home, interestingly, there's a significant amount, at least in the Rochester area, so not really in the town I'm from, but like say 30 minutes and farther towards that more metropolitan area, they had a lot of little free libraries. And I remember one time a friend of mine was really excited and she wanted to go on this like book day where we went to all of the local secondhand shops in Rochester, as well as the few free libraries that existed. And so I ended up, for the occasion, bringing a whole bunch of books that I wanted to then just at least disperse among the little free libraries. And so that was a really fun day. I don't think I ended up taking any books from there, but I added books. So I'm a huge supporter of it. I love that idea. It's just a great way to, again, pass on literature, because that's the point of books. My favorite thing is to gift books that I've already read, so then I can talk to the person that I've given this copy to and just enjoy or rant about it, whatever the case is. So little free libraries make 100% sense to me, and I think they're great, especially in areas where if you don't really have too many libraries, maybe it's a library every few towns, then this is a beautiful way to help spread and share your books. And yeah, I'm 100% for it. I just don't have many in my area right now. So this is probably okay. This is definitely not necessarily one of the controversial questions, but it's one of those ones where I definitely don't feel buyer's remorse. I want to say that first and foremost. I don't think that that's a healthy thing to have. Even if I'm trying to lower my TBR, if I am desperate to get this book, or I pre-ordered a book that I'm really excited for, then I do think it's worth the money. I don't think that books aren't worth the money, you know? Like, that's obviously why we're booktubers, that's why we're avid readers. So I don't really believe in buyer's remorse unless you have purchased the book for like inappropriate reasons. I just almost knocked my water bottle down. I usually feel really excited. I get a sense of euphoria. I think at one point, especially from my old habits of binge buying for necessity reasons, that has kind of been a problem. And that's kind of why I've started this channel, because obviously that was due to necessity, whereas now that I live in an area that has more accessibility to buying books, I don't need to be binge buying every time I visit a bookstore, because I could be visiting a bookstore every week if I wanted to. And so there is a difference when it comes to that for me, for my life. It just doesn't make sense to binge buy now since I have so much accessibility to other books, but I fully get it for other people's lives if that's the way they consume and buy books. When it comes to sharing the books I buy or discussing it, I said at the beginning of this channel that I was going to admit to every book I buy, and the same with every book I unhaul if I don't end up reading it and I'm just purging my TBR shelves. But I haven't really done that because, one thing, I haven't really thought about it and I don't do it often enough. I would have to like keep the books in a pile to then, you know, say that I've bought them or say that I've unhauled them. I do have a journal, my bullet journal, and there I keep track of my pre-orders. So if I pre-order a book, I like write it down in like a little calendar that I've put on. So then I just know it's coming, because that's the thing. For instance, my most recent pre-order is a book that comes out in February 2023. It's the second book to the Bone Spindle series, which is chef's kiss, by the way. I mean, of course, I'm only talking about the debut first novel, but it's so good and I'm so anticipating the second book that of course I pre-ordered it and it comes out in February. I'm not going to remember that, so I have it in my bullet journal that it comes out then so that I can be prepared. And if I'm going to be like away that week, then I know what to do with my mail. Anyway, so that's really the only way that I keep track of that. I also like to keep track in my bullet journal about what types of books I'm consuming in regards to how I got them. So like if I did just buy the book and I read it this month, in my little monthly tags, I'll show you my most recent one, for instance, even though it's not a good example because I didn't have any purchased books. But like if you go down to where it says from, you know, physical TBR 4, I had 1 Neck Alley Arc and I had 2 from the library, and I didn't actually have any books that I recently purchased that I read, so it's a 0. But actually, just for fun, do you want to look at that really fun spread I did for August? I'm really excited about it. Anyway, so let's move on. I love looking at my books. I feel so cozy and safe, and I'm really pleased by the number of books I have. While I'm trying to lessen the ratio of how many books I own and I haven't read yet to having a majority of the books I own that I have, that doesn't mean that I hate looking at my TBR shelves. They're full of possibilities of new authors I've never read yet, or authors that I've read so many books and yet there's still a few I haven't gotten to. So I definitely have a really pleasing feeling when I'm looking at them, even though, you know, they are not organized in the least. I don't feel any difference between if I'm, I guess, adding more to the pile than if I'm taking away. I think that's something I should be keeping better track of. I definitely feel really good at the end of a month when I see out of the books I've read that the highest number is from my TBR shelves. I mean, I won't be upset if I've mostly read NetGalley arcs or if I've mostly read library books, and whatever, it's life. If I read mostly purchased books, at least I'm reading them, I'm buying them, but then I'm immediately reading them, so I can't be upset with myself for that. But I do get like a little sense of like excitement and this little like small step towards the end all goal if most of the books out of them all were books already on my physical TBR. I think at the moment, the right amount for me is consistency. So not having that number get too crazy where it just keeps going up and up and up. I am totally fine with buying books when I really know that I want to. And I haven't read the book yet, but I know I'm gonna love it. I don't want it to be as if I'm like, oh man, now it's gonna go from say like 310 to 311. I don't care about that. I think I would care if I suddenly was adding 10 and 10 and 10 and not seeing any type of regulation. I think it's fine if I'm fluctuating, adding a couple books, but then in a couple months taking those off. And most of the books that I'm trying to accumulate right now are ones that I want to prioritize reading very soon. So even though I've added them to my TBR, my intention is that they'll then be removed and added to my have read shelves quite quickly. And it's been pretty successful thus far. So I don't really care as long as I'm not suddenly reading anything and I just keep buying and buying, because that doesn't make any sense to me. I actually have many different things that I pull from. I have a few jars that I just made ideas for if I wanted to have fun. I've utilized them for a TBR game before. I've also used them just as a fun scavenger hunt video, which I'll link below because I had a lot of fun and I hope you do if you haven't seen it yet. But the difference is my jovial jar are for like individual book picks. So it'll just be some type of niche or very vague description of a book that I should try to find and fill that prompt. And what I originally did for Victoria, my girl Victoria, I created TBR themes. So like for an entire TBR stack, I should have this theme going with them because I thought that could be really fun, but I haven't really utilized it. I only used this jar once for a TBR game and I did have a lot of fun, but I don't really remember how successful it was in my execution of reading those books on my TBR for that month. I also just tend to have plans that fill up my TBRs very quickly. For instance, I'm a huge fan of buddy reads and book clubs because I also think they're a great way to try to read books on your TBR. If there's someone else who has that book too and they really want to read it, then it really motivates you to prioritize it because you have someone you can immediately speak with and talk about how much you hated it or how much you loved it or whatever, and that's my favorite thing in the world. And the same thing with book clubs too. And that's been really helpful for me, especially over the summer. So they've just been piling up and I really haven't had to choose my TBR at all because I've already had a stack of books that I plan on reading with others and that's had to be my priority. I'm also getting into readathons, which has added to my TBR Jenga because I'm trying to fill in prompts, and that's pretty much what I'm doing for all of August, but I'm mood reading for this month, so I really don't have any book stacks planned, but I have the events I want to participate in, and that will influence the books I end up picking up. For instance, I was doing the Jane Austen in July, where I was reading a Jane Austen book in July, and that was Emma, and I didn't end up finishing it for July. I'm actually probably about halfway because this is a big book, but I'm hoping to finish it, because I still obviously am really enjoying it, and if the mood pushes me to finish it in August, then I will do it. And this is actually kind of on a work TBR. Again, working for She Done It. There are certain golden age books that I really want to prioritize, especially if they're a part of the book club, which this is for August, or if they're just an author that we're about to discuss on the podcast and I want to be just better read when it comes to the subjects that they write about, then I will prioritize them and add them to my TBR, but I count them as work. So it's like reading for pleasure and work, and sometimes I don't add that to my official video TBR, but I have that in mind as well. So yeah, that's just how I haven't really had to. I thought when I'm gonna give you a little insight into my booktube journey. I thought starting in January that I was gonna have to be like super creative in how I created my TBRs, because I'd have to be fighting to make sure I had enough books that I planned to read. And then as every month went by, my list just happened to me, and I literally didn't have to, I had to work hard to not add too many books to my TBR list. So that's been one of the things that I haven't really even had to think about on Booktube, which is quite funny. So yeah, it hasn't been a problem for me at all. Okay, so for this question, I don't believe I have a book buying problem. I don't think that a book buying problem was the reason I started this Booktube channel. It's not the reason why I want to get my TBR down to 0, because what's been great is that I've seen so many other booktubers who have so many more books on their TBR shelves than I do. So I'm worried about small apples. I think that's the phrase, and we're gonna go with it. But the one thing that I do think really influenced me, and why I'm in a bit of a different situation than, for instance, Amy, because she has liked to say that we're polar opposites, because as I'm trying to lessen my TBR, she's just gladly adding them, and I'm honestly having the best time watching her grow her TBR, so no complaints here. But one of the reasons, at least from what I can understand about her situation, is that I currently live in a temporary apartment. I moved to this area for college. I'm attending a 2-year master's program, and then at the moment, I don't have any intentions of staying here for a prolonged time after I finish my master's degree. So I just don't have the permanent space to be adding so many books that I intend to move, in a short time within the year. So that's the one thing I've been very conscious of after. So during the pandemic, I was living at home. I was fortunate to have just returned home and was still figuring things out. And so, most of my books have been at my family residence during my adult life. And I've always just been visiting home, grabbing the books I want, and I haven't really had to think about it. But when I moved for graduate school, I really up and moved. Like I have all of the books I own with me, and it really got me thinking as I was realizing I don't have any space. So like these are filled with my TBR books, as are my skeleton closet, because I currently live in a studio apartment that didn't have a built-in closet. So I have this very skeletal structure, and the top shelves that are meant for like your sweaters have been filled with books, and I have like a little mini bookshelf of like all of my have reads and over there. So I have books everywhere, and I've realized that this is a temporary space. And so that's been a big reason for why I've been so tentative of growing my collection, because quite soon, in like a matter of maybe 12 months or so, I will have to then pack all of them away in boxes again. And so I think that's why I come from a very different perspective from, say, Amy, who has a lovely library catalog system to keep track of her books, and she has these huge shelves, and it's amazing. But from what I understand, she's in a more permanent location, so that could be the difference. And I think that's why we're coming from different, I guess, philosophies when it comes to our Booktube channels. But I don't think that anyone can do any of it the wrong way. And I think that's what's important to take from these book acquiring videos. I'm hoping that no one's being too harsh on themselves, because we're all here to do the same thing, which is to enjoy and talk about books and make friends and get more recommendations. And if we are at different places in our lives, of course, we're gonna have different strategies and habits when it comes to acquiring, reading, and discussing books, and I'm all here for it. I love to support those who are trying to grow their libraries as much as possible, but I also love to try to support those who just are trying to maybe save up money for a certain event or for a certain thing, and buying books is harming that progress. Then maybe that's why they're trying to lessen their buying, habits, or whatever the case is. But for me, it's just that I've become very aware that I'm in a temporary place, and I've already moved all these books once, so I know how much work it's gonna be. But anyway, thank you so much to Booktube with Amy for tagging me. I, again, will emphasize you should go see what she says in these answers. I had a really good time comparing and gaining a lot of really good ideas from her. For instance, the environmental impact on buying books, especially new books, is just something that we probably don't think about too often because we're seeing other major, I guess, environmental effects from different industries going on, but the book industry has its own environmental effect, and we have our own carbon footprints as individuals to think about, so I really appreciated that. And I loved her push for used books unless it's an indie author, because that's another thing we don't tend to think about. We don't tend to look at the publisher or, you know, who the author is sometimes, when obviously if it's Penguin or some other, you know, sub company below them, they're not the ones who are as desperately in need as some of the independent publishers that exist. So those are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Amy's lovely philosophies. So go check her out. But now it's time for me to, I guess, tag other people. And I have a list because I wanted to have good reasons for why I'm naming them. So one of the people I'm going to be calling out and seeing if you want to participate is Book In with Deborah. Deborah has been a friend of mine on this channel for a significant amount of time. I really enjoy watching her videos because she does a similar thing as Amy, where it's really just a sit-down video and you're chatting with a friend about a book. I really appreciate her recommendations because she does tend to read and focus on a lot of diverse books. She's trying to read a book from every single country, which is just awesome. But she also recently wondered if she should count the number of books she has on her TBR, and I think it could be fun if she starts to really think about these questions and acquiring books herself. I also am going to recommend two people who just had really big book haul videos, which is quite exciting, but that means that it's quite relevant to their lives right now, some of these questions, and that is Girly Girl Bookworm and Reading Off Grid. I know that Amy is friends with Reading Off Grid, so she may have been tagged already, but I'd still be interested to see, and I want to support her making that video if she's kind of been putting it off. So if I've just named you, you have been tagged for certain reasons, and if you don't end up doing it, it's not a big deal. I appreciate you making it to the end of the video. If you had any similar answers or completely different answers, please comment below and consider giving the video a like, consider subscribing, ringing that bell, and let's make some friends. All right, thanks everybody. Bye!